With that, I will call up Chris Kamen to introduce our speaker.
All right. I'm gonna have to hold this up. My eyes aren't what they used to be. Eliazar A. Posada Jr. became the mic. Oh, is that what oh, is that better? Okay. Eliazar A. Posada Jr. became the first openly LGBTQ Latino elected in North Carolina after winning a special election for Carrboro Town Council in 2022. Born in Florida and raised in the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas, he has worked and lived in North Carolina since 2006. He serves as the executive director of EqualityNC, the oldest statewide organization in the country, directly dedicated to securing rights and protections for the LGBTQ community. He is also founder of Posada Strategy Consulting, a consulting firm that works with nonprofits and grassroots organizations to build capacity, develop programs, and create strategies around fundraising, community outreach, and advocacy. Eliazar began his work with El Centro Hispano as a community specialist and grew to be acting president and CEO, where he led the programs and advocacy efforts that impact low-income LGBTQ and undocumented communities. He currently sits on the board of directors of several local nonprofits, including the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Chapel Hill and Carrboro, Enlace Latino NC, and more. Eliazar has received numerous awards for his community service to the community, including the 2021 Frida Kahlo Lifetime Achievement Award, the 2021 Latino Diamante Latino Advocate Award, the 2023 Hispanic Federation's Ferreza Fest Visibility Award, and the 2024 Under 40 Impact Award from the National League of Cities. In 2022, he was asked by Governor Cooper to join his advisory council for Hispanic and Latino affairs, where he continues to lead the council's work on Latino health. Eliazar is proud to serve our community. So without further ado, please welcome Eliazar.
Ooh, that's a little. Oh. Okay. There we go. How are y'all doing? Good afternoon. Thank you for the first for the welcome this morning, for the inspiration around inventors, many of which I knew the names, I didn't know the history. So thank you so much for teaching me this morning. As you heard, I'm Eliazar Posada. I have the honor of serving on the Carrboro Town Council and the executive director at Equality North Carolina. As you heard, the oldest LGBTQ statewide advocacy organization in the nation. Being the first, we're not the only. We now have 32 other state equalities across the states. We have Equality Texas, Equality Florida, Equality Maine, and some are fairness. That's fine, you know. Fairness Tennessee, Fairness Virginia, that's fine. But we do a lot of work really educating community and working for our LGBTQ plus folks, not just here in North Carolina, but nationwide. When I was reading the request, oh, perfect. Thank you. When I was reading the request to come and provide some information and to provide a speech to y'all, I was like, who are these guys? You know, gonna be honest. Look y'all up. This was pretty cool. I really enjoyed reading a little bit about the Humanist Society. I really thinking through that. It was like, what am I going to talk about, right? We're Latino Hispanic Heritage Month, right? But we just had Durham Pride yesterday. Which thank you for being there. My staff was there. We were worried it was going to rain out, but it turned out great. Love it. Love it. Love it. Um, and I was thinking, by the way, there's some slides that we sent over, and we'll make sure that everybody gets those afterwards. But I wanted to have more of a conversation this morning. We'll go through what that information is because unfortunately I know it too well. But and I want to make sure that y'all have those stats, but I also want to kind of open a little bit or talk a little bit about what is it that we do really, right? So Equality North Carolina started in 1979. 1979. Started off as a social justice fund to support people who are being incarcerated for being who they are here in North Carolina, specifically trans people, right? So it started as a legal defense fund, social justice fund. It's now grown to be basically three institutions in one. We have a foundation that does a lot of education around North Carolina. We have organizers and officers across the state in Western Carolina, Charlotte, Triad, here in the Triangle, and we're opening up some more folks up in Eastern Carolina. We work with our youth, with our rural youth empowerment program, where it works with young queer people in rural areas of the state to provide them some leadership, to provide them some space to get to know their community, and then also some funding so that they can create a project in their own communities. Have y'all heard of Pittsboro? Yeah, it's a little town now. Did you know about Pittsboro Pride that started a couple of years ago? One of our fellows was instrumental in getting that going. It's a young woman who wanted to get who had been to the Durham Pride, who had been to the Charlotte Prides. Part of the fellowship, she went to DC to advocate for the LGBT community and was part of DC Pride and was like, I want to bring this to my community. Worked with their town, didn't get a permit, wasn't allowed, didn't get a proclamation, but worked with other leaders in the community and then ended up doing it at a brewery. And I was able to attend that. It was wonderful. It like the little parade was really just a circle around the property and it had little cows. That was great. Love that. But we also have folks who, for example, one of our recent fellows, member of the Lumbee tribe, did a presentation about the intersection of LGBTQ and Indigenous life in North Carolina, basing it out of the Lumbee tribe, and has been doing that presentation across the South, which is really cool. We have and this is our foundation side. So the foundation, think of this as your nonpartisan education, really driving deep, that leadership and that engagement in community. We have our C4, which is our political organization, right? Equality North Carolina. In this one, we do a little bit more of a lobbying work, right? Who's heard of the General Assembly? Right. We know what happens up in Raleigh, right? And this is I'll talk a little bit deeper about this in a minute, but one of the things we do with Equality North Carolina, the C4 side, is work to combat some of the anti-LGBTQ bills that happen at the General Assembly. Last session, we had 13 bills that were filed that were targeting trans and queer people in North Carolina. Out of the 13, we defeated 11. We secured vetoes for the additional 2. And one of them, the veto was overturned, unfortunately. But out of 13, we were able to defeat 12, which was really great. Yeah. Yeah. Give it up for that. That's a lot of work. Good. But we didn't do it alone, right? We had 447 people from across the state come to testify at the General Assembly.
Wow. That's
The way that North Carolina works and the General Assembly works is you can't testify to the entire membership. You have to go to the committees, right? So you have to go to Judiciary Committee, the Education Committee, the Health Committee, the Rules and Regulations, and so on and so forth. I don't even know all of them. I don't think half of the members know all of them. And the way that works is you show up at 9:30 or at 11 or at 1 or at 2, whenever that committee is, and you sign up to speak and you say what bill you want to speak on. When the committee gets to that bill, the chair can decide how much time we're going to give people to speak. It could be a minute, it could be 3 minutes, it could be 30 seconds, so on and so forth. We did the work to make sure that at every single committee hearing, we had people there. When we were talking about attacking young people in schools, we had teachers, we had parents, we had educators. When we were talking about healthcare for trans and queer folks, we had nurses, we had medical providers, we had PhDs, we had doctors, we have MDs, we had people from the community showing up, and sometimes with less than 2 hours notice. We had this is fun times, right? We were in a 9 a.m. hearing, I think it was on education, talking about one of the bills that was limiting what our young people can do in schools, like the LGBTQ groups that happened, like the QSAs, the GSAs. And in the middle of that hearing, we get a notice that the bill that was not supposed to be heard until the following Tuesday, and I think this was a Wednesday, the following Tuesday at 2 p.m. was moved to Wednesday at noon. So we are over here like we don't have anybody prepared, but immediately because of all the work that we've been doing to educate people and get them ready to present, we were able to we put out a call, we sent some messages, people were able to show up. And of course we showed up and we had 4 speakers on that bill. So all that to say, a lot of great work happens in the engagement part. And then there's our PAC, which is, I think, the funner one, right? This is the one we actually get to work with candidates. One of the things that we talk about in the PAC is we have a 25-member board on our PAC. Unfortunately, as the executive director, I don't get to make decisions about what the PAC does. I just get to enforce those. But these are all people who care deeply about the work at EqualityNC, care deeply about the community and are members of the community themselves. And they'll interview candidates at all levels of government and then decide whether or not they deserve our endorsement. And based on that, we will do some work with those candidates. We'll go door knocking. We'll do phone banking. That's not the funnest thing for me, but I'll do it. We do meet and greets and make sure that that the people that we're endorsing are going to be champions for our community and make sure that they're getting elected. I'm extremely proud to say that 100% of our LGBTQ endorsed candidates last year got elected. So that's huge. Thank you. Took a lot of work, right? And we were thinking about this, and this is why I mentioned it's one of the funnest parts for me because I get to actually go out and like door knock, right? In my executive director role, I'm in charge of the whole organization, right? I have to make sure that payroll is going through. I'm talking to our funders. I'm making sure that their grants are being filled in, that we're looking at the strategic plan and dealing with the board and all that fun stuff. But when I get to be in community, that is so fun for me. And I'll tell you a little bit about why that's fun, right? I mentioned that we had 13 anti-LGBTQ bills filed in North Carolina last year. Would it surprise you to say that North Carolina is not even in the middle of states that, as far as how many bills they're introducing? That's last year. Not even last year, this year, before like session starting in January, we've had over 550 anti-LGBTQ bills filed across the United States, right? And we're not even counting the states that are not in legislative session now. We're not counting the states who are doing executive orders, for example, Texas. We're not counting, the local stuff that happens. We're only counting the statewide bills that are introduced. Over 550 just this year alone. And many of the sessions, like in North Carolina, the session's not over yet, right? So when we're thinking about the landscape across the US, where we're looking at, and this is where those partnerships come really, really important, become very important, right? We're talking about bills that sometimes are filed simply to make a point, right? We have some bills who have been filed simply they're horribly worded, they don't really have any mechanism of enforcement, but it's simply for the author to go out into his community or her community and say, I'm fighting against this radical ideology. And then we have some folks who are actually caring about their community, who put in some bills that are misinformed, and we can work with folks like that. We can educate, but more and more we're getting into the sense of attacking simply for the political points. Most of these attacks come under about 5 different criteria, right? We have attacks on gender affirming care, right? And this is just in general, not just talking about young people, just anyone. Like there is at least 50 bills that were filed in the United States, one of them here in North Carolina, that was seeking to limit gender affirming care. for anyone who identifies as transgender or genderqueer. We have limitations on trans kids in sports and just trans people in sports. It's another big one. Funny thing again, North Carolina had one of those bills, and you'll find out that North Carolina is a little bit of a petri dish for some of these bills. And if you were to think about it, the way that the General Assembly spoke about it, you would think that we had thousands of trans students out there taking away scholarships. Anybody want to guess how many trans students, trans athletes we had in North Carolina? Close. 3. We had 3. How many of those actually had a plan to go into college sports? 0. But if you were to think about it, if you were to read the laws, read what they're putting out, this is holy smokes, Batman. So again, some of them are political points. Another category is limiting young people's access to gender-affirming care. And I want to be clear on this one. For young people, gender-affirming care is not always medication. It's not always beta blockers. It's mental health support. Before any young person gets to the place of getting any kind of medication or blockers or anything like that, there's a whole area of care that goes from identifying and speaking to mental health professional, going through therapy, identifying all these things, doing some what we would call as normalizing in the household, right? So starting to be named by a different name, by respecting pronouns, maybe starting to socially transition a little bit. But of course, if you would think about it, if you were to read some of these bills and what people are saying is like, we're trying to do, sex changes for 5-year-olds, which again is not the case at all. Many of these gender affirming surgeries, and those are the ones that actually, everything from a nose job to any other parts of your body, don't typically happen till after you're 18 or 19. But of course, we do have kids at 14, 15 who are getting nose jobs, just because they want to look prettier. That's allowed. But when we're talking about someone who wants to do some changes based on their identity, we're saying that's not okay. I have some thoughts about that one, but anyway. And then, we also have what are falling under kind of restrictions on First Amendment for queer people, right? We had bans on, or attempts to ban drag story hour or drag performances, trying to limit spaces for LGBTQ people to, come together, and like prides as saying that those are areas where there's perversion and all that fun stuff. So we're looking at different categories of bills and legislation who's attacking the LGBT community in these days. But that's not it, right? We can sit here and talk about all the horrible things that are happening and how every time one of these bills is filed, the suicide rate for queer trans people skyrockets. We can talk about how the administration has just cut funding for the trans lifeline, where kids could call and get mental health support when they're in a bad place. We can talk about how states are actively trying to pursue parents who are affirming to their kids. We can do that. We can talk about how that is happening and sit here and wallow in sorrow, and I might start crying, and if I cry, y'all are gonna definitely cry because I'm an emotional crier. But we can also talk about the good things that are happening, right? At the same time, the LGBT queer community has been resilient for longer than I've been alive, for longer than most of us in this room have been alive. And I can see who's in the room. I know that the community has been alive longer than that. Everything from fighting to be yourself in spaces and areas and decades where, even being perceived as gay could get you killed. Unfortunately, there's still some places today where that happens. In the United States, we've seen this in cycles, right? In the 80s and early 90s, we're talking about the AIDS epidemic and how that was demonizing queer and queer community, right? We have the beginnings of Pride as a form of protest, which was, New York trying to oppress the queer and trans communities, which led to the Stonewall riots, which led to, the parade in downtown Los Angeles, no, San Francisco, and then Los Angeles, and then you have Harvey Milk, and then you have World Pride starting up, and you have deer. Like, where I'm going with this is at the same time as all these attacks are happening, we have people like uh not just ENC. We are statewide and we work with a lot of our partners. But for example, Ashboro Latinx Services. It's a small group in Ashboro, North Carolina, who is gathering queer and trans people in rural areas and providing them a safe space to come and seek mental health services, providing space to do health retreats, working with people to connect them to, if they're undocumented, connect with immigration attorneys who are trying to actually get their status so that they're not then deported to a space where being themselves can get them killed or arrested. We're talking about here locally, we have a pop-up LGBTQ center that comes up and does events around Carborough, Chapel Hill, bringing in this community together to just work on whatever it is that folks want to do, right? Everything from our Latinx Pride Festival that happens in Carborough to our small town Pride that happens here in Chapel Hill, Carborough. And then one of the things that has really driven me more over the last year or so that I've been the executive director has seen our community really focus in on educating themselves and their neighbors about what the queer and LGBTQ community really is, right? I cannot express how happy I feel when someone comes into me, or for example, we did this advocacy day, right? We had about 300 people come to the General Assembly, and we worked with partners in like Planned Parenthood, like Report Rights North Carolina, like El Pueblo. And there was this one guy, and of course, and I try to not judge by seeing people, right? But this guy comes in here with like pretty big white guy, looking with a big uh beard, looks like, like just comes hang out like this big guy. And I'm over here, oh, like, okay, I'm a little nervous. What's up? And the sweetest person in the world, right? But it was like if you pull someone out of like oh, what's that? The show with the towing car, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Wait, no, what? No. It's like a towing company car, like maybe. I don't know. It looks like a guy that's gonna come and like take your car and he's gonna punch you up. Like that's I was like, oh, which I was like, okay, let me put my huh? Yeah, repro, yeah. So I was like, let me put my judgments aside. It's like, hey, what's up? How you doing? I go talk to him, and he's like, oh, cool, I'm here to advocacy. I'm like, oh, perfect, cool. Let's get you signed up. Let's talk to you. And then he's like, I don't know much about this stuff, but I've been learning. And I'm like, okay, cool. Let's sit down and chat a little bit more. And he tells me the story about how he up until we did this advocacy day in May. Up until a couple of months before, he had been like a staunch supporter of the current administration and had all these preconceived ideas of what LGBTQ was and had, drinking the Kool-Aid, thinking that all queer people want to do is indoctrinate your kids. And of course, um, but his kid came out to him. And this was after his kid had moved out. They hadn't talked for several years. He tried to rebuild a connection with his daughter. And finally, his daughter let him know that we cannot speak because I just don't feel safe around you. And like this big burly guy that I was afraid of turned into a puddle of tears, right? And in front of like this group of like 300 people who are like assembling, and there's like a workshop going on over there to talk about your legislator and people are talking about talking points, and I'm over here in the corner talking to this guy, and he's tearing up and telling me how much it hurt for him to hear from his daughter that her own dad was in a space that she could feel comfortable even being around. And it took that for him to learn and take, he said, like, I started with YouTube videos, but my daughter told me to stop doing that. I'm like, great, because that's not a, but his daughter had talked to him about what the queer community is, who we are, what does it mean for her to be lesbian. And he took some time to learn. And in the process of, I think it was like around 6 months, wanted to show up and advocate for his daughter, even though his daughter's no longer in North Carolina, because he did not want to have other kids feel like they're not safe to tell their own parents who they are. And he learned that the General Assembly was causing that to happen. Like, it was a whole nother thing. And again, here I am. I was like, I'm over here, like, I'm not gonna judge anybody, but I'm like, ooh, there's this guy that's going up, And being able to talk to him about that and really break down those barriers. And we talked about other things and we don't fully agree, but that's totally fine. Where was I going with? I was going with the good things, right? I keep focusing on that. I focus that when we have conversations, when we talk to people, when we open hearts and minds, we're able to make some change. It's slow, doesn't happen overnight. It takes bravery for everyone like myself who has been doing this work for a long time, to community members, to young people. And it also takes a lot of faith that at one point things are going to get better. Right. And I think one of the points I try from my community is, regardless of what's happening, we're still going to continue to fight back, and we're continue to work towards North Carolina that'll be equitable for all of us. So I'll leave you with this. We cannot do this work alone, right? Both Equality North Carolina, your local communities, your neighbors, your friends. We can't do this community alone. So continue to do what you're doing here. Continue to have conversations. We continue to advocate for the humanity of all of us. And if you can, use your 3 T's wisely. What are 3 T's, right? Yeah. T's: time, treasure, and talent. We all have these 3 things in different amounts. We may not have much time, but we have a talent. We may not have a lot of time or talent, but we have a lot of treasure. Maybe we don't have that much treasure, or maybe the talents that we have may not be useful for advocacy, but we have some time. We got time to learn, right? So whether it's volunteering your time, your expertise, or your treasure, please use those wisely and put those into organizations, into capacity building, into places where y'all feel are making a difference. Because at the end of the day, as long as we continue to have these conversations, as long as we continue to implement and invest our time, treasure, and talent in those organizations, those groups, those efforts that are going to build a better future, we'll get there eventually. Thank you all.
Give me 1 minute and we'll have questions. Thank you for a great talk, and we're going to have a question and answer period. Before we do that, we're going to pass some baskets. Our society is an all-volunteer organization. We receive no money from any other organization. We survive due to your commitment to our common goals. So we pass the baskets, and thank you in advance for your generous donations. So we're going to have Q&A, and so the rules are raise your hand. We have a Zoom audience, and so the little tiny mic is for the Zoom folks. And wait for the microphone, ask 1 question at a time, and let everyone have a chance before asking a second one, if you would. And so we'll call for questions. And who has the mic? There we go. You.
What was the difference in the county not sponsoring Big Ride and the city doing it? Was it a matter of funding, or was it a matter of resistance?
That's a great question. For all of you who may not know this story, all prides are funded through sponsorships. Some of them are by independent industries, right? You have your Bank of Americas, your local businesses. Some rely on your town to sponsor the event, like pay for the space. Durham Pride has been one of those prides, which is one of the largest ones, has historically relied on both. There is investment from the community, investment from small businesses, and investment from the elected officials. Both the city of Durham and the county of Durham have been historic sponsors of Pride. This last year, the county decided to not allocate the budgeted amount that was already set for Durham Pride. They decided to do that about a month ago. They released the notice about a month ago. And that was because they received from what I understand, and I'm not an elected official in the county, but this is what I have been told by them, is that the county received notice that should they continue with the sponsorship of Pride, they're going to find themselves being investigated and possibly lose federal funding because of their support of quote unquote radical ideology, which this administration is actively fighting. So both Durhams had a decision, the city and the county. The county decided to not sponsor and pull back the funds that they had already promised. It's a political decision. That's what they came out of. We've had other municipalities who had done the opposite. We've had some folks who also received some, and they're like, all right, come at me. We had corporations this year who had been longtime sponsors of Prides, who have also either reduced or eliminated their sponsorship. And all of this is really born out of what's happening at the federal level and the attention that people are getting from supporting these events. Prior to last year, in the first Trump administration, there was some pushback, but it wasn't the amount we're seeing now. And I think one of the things that have really driven that is the outward community backlash that we haven't seen before. So when we have, conservative icons calling out a specific business or town or organization for doing or sponsoring some of these events, we see the response that we're seeing now, where people are rather not contribute and not put themselves in the limelight. It was their decision to make. I have my opinions on it. If you're asking me what they are, I will tell you, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Yes. You've been active with Pride organization for a while. Has and you're discussing this now about regional supporters.
Yeah.
Conservative side. What about the human capital that supports Pride organization? Is it growing, shrinking, staying the same?
Yeah. So I'll preface this by saying that EqualityNC, as a statewide organization, we support a lot of uh, municipal and small prides. And for folks in the Zoom who may have not heard the question was around, as we're seeing funding and sponsors really bring down their financial contributions to these events, to the political activity, is that it had an impact on the human capacity and the human participation on it. Did I get that correct? Perfect. And I would say it just varies on where we're at, right? So we have a working group of Pride organizers in North Carolina where we help facilitate conversations about safety and security. And we have in North Carolina about 48 Prides that happen throughout the year. Some folks have a Pride month. We have like a Pride calendar. And we're seeing a lot of, primarily in the smaller, more rural areas where you have people their information being put out into the public, that we're seeing more of an impact. But it also just depends on where you're at, right? And who's organizing. Some folks who were doxxed familiar with that term. Doxed is when someone gets all your information and puts it out publicly. It puts your full name, your address, your phone number, your employer's information, your employer's contact information, and says, "This is Eliazar Posada. He's all his information. He's pushing out XYZ, and we don't like it." And then people take it upon themselves to take whatever actions they seem fit to combat, your actions. So we're seeing some of it. But we're also seeing primarily in the smaller, more rural spaces where it was already a big stand up for them to start it, but they're continuing it. But we also have seen at the same time much more calls for safety, right? I'll give you Apex, for example. Apex, ENC had to come in and take over the paperwork of Apex because Apex is not run by a full organization. It's run by a group that uses a C3, like a local charity, to get the permits and pay for all these things because the organizers are not an organization themselves. They're just community members. But there was a bomb threat. So about a week before the event, the charity that was holding the license let the organizers know, because of all this and like because of the bomb threat, we do not feel safe holding this event. So the organizers we like literally we are off Friday before the next Saturday when the event happens. What are we gonna do? We moved quickly, took over all the paperwork, and we would transfer the permits and transfer everything over to ENC. Took a little bit of a work to be able to do that. But we also at the same time increased both, communications with local law enforcement so that we had like a team ready to go that wasn't actively out in there, but ready to go in the moment that we needed action. But also we worked with folks like Ready to Ground, which is community-based safety groups who are out there monitoring and building that. So there's an impact for sure. For folks who were at Durham yesterday, you might have noticed that this year was a little bit smaller of a crowd than we've seen in previous years. There's obviously a storm that was happening, so maybe that was part of it. But unfortunately, it's just with Charlotte as well. Charlotte, you're typically looking at about 50,000 people coming into town. Estimates are around 35. So still huge, still important, but we're starting to see that little by little.
Just had a small follow-up to the Durham Pride event. The county had allocated $10,000 for this event. And a group, sometime this past week, a group of citizens or a single person maybe set up a fund, GoFundMe kind of thing where they've already collected a couple $1,000. So if you're interested, you may look for that.
Yes, the organizer was Nida Alam, who is actually a commissioner in Durham. And she decided that after the decision was made that she was going to try to fundraise for it. She did some events. That link is still active. All you got to do if you want to support that is just Google Durham Pride fundraiser, and one of the first things that will come up in your search engine is going to be that crowdfunding. I think it's through GoFundMe. I think they did it, or one of the other two. Yeah.
I just want to mention briefly for the people who are coming here on the Zoom call, if you have questions, please put the question in the chat and then I will relay it to the speaker.
Is that what you did?
No.
Oh.
Oh. Well, let me see.
There's a chat thing.
I have a question that
Yeah.
relates more to your position on the Carborough.
Yeah.
Another item of fear in our current times is ice. And I wondered if you could give us an update on whether or not
Oh, yeah.
Carborough has any awareness of anything or is doing anything to prepare for possible ice raids.
Yes, that is also thank you for bringing that. 'Cause like, we talk about intersectionality, right? I stand here as queer, Latino, son of immigrants, elected official. So there's a lot of things that come into that. So to answer your question, Carborough has taken a stance since even before I was elected, that we do not cooperate with ICE, period. Full stop. We're not going to use any town resources to cooperate with ICE. We do work with our community members to be prepared. We passed the Fourth Amendment resolution a couple of months ago, which is basically a reassertion that anybody who is trying to come into either a town, a municipal building, or encouraging local businesses as well, that if anybody comes into their space who is trying to arrest someone, have an actual arrest warrant before they're able to come in. And that's a form of protection, because we also see that there's been a lot of raids at places of employment, right? And they're like, "Oh, we're here to do this." So we're working with with local businesses to make sure that they have all the tools to be able to say, like, "Where is your warrant?" if you actually want to come into that. There's also, we have a pretty vibrant community who has been working on community readiness, everything from Know Your Rights events that happen in our trailer parks to our apartment complexes. Carborough in Motion is a town-sponsored event that we go into different spaces in town and bring in like all of our town services. We talk about, how to remain active, about healthy behaviors, composting, and know your rights while we're out there. We bring in a Zumba instructor we're talking Zumba and people are doing you bring in the full family and someone's doing Zumba, everybody else is looking at, oh, the firefighters and the big thing, jumping on the thing, getting the hose while we're out there. By the way, here's an information about know your rights. So we are very cognizant of that. And I think we are as a town, we're very much in the sense of, if there's anything that we know, our community is going to know about it immediately. Unfortunately, we can't control what happens in the with federal resources. I wish we did. We don't. But as soon as we know something, we let people know, specifically our key community leaders that work with the refugee community, we work with the immigrant community and with the undocumented community. As soon as we know something, we tell them and they relate to the community, and there's mechanisms in place. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that what we found in our family, and this was related to trans kids in sports in the K-12 group. What we found eventually is that one of the areas of competition where it doesn't matter what gender you are is ultimate frisbee. And it's a real thing, and it's really a fun thing. And then trans kids, it doesn't matter if you're trans or anywhere on the spectrum. If you're a good player, you're a good player, and you have so much fun. And they have A teams, B teams, and state competitions, and everybody is just out there to be good people together enjoying a sporting activity. And I was really thankful that that was initiated just a few years ago. And it really has served our trans kids so well. So I just wanted to, you probably were part of it. I just wanted to say how much it's made a huge difference in our family.
No, thank you for that. It's funny because when I was in college, I was a part of a intramural frisbee, ultimate frisbee group. I was terrible. I was like, they were just like, dude, just run back and forth and play defense. Don't try to catch it or throw it. I'm like, that's fine. That's fine. But it's hilarious that, we give so much attention to high school sports. And 90% of the students in high school sports are just there to have fun, are just to build camaraderie. They love the sport and want to be able to do it. They know they're not going to be like Olympic champions, and they're not going to go out to, like, folks know that, right? So when we're really looking about what is collegiate and school sports supposed to be doing, they're supposed to be building a team. They're supposed to be building leadership. They're supposed to be building a community. So by omitting trans kids based on their identity from being able to be a part of that, you're not just doing yourself or that person a disservice, you're doing the community you're supposed to be building a disservice. And hey, maybe that person is great or not, like me. And at the end of the day, what's the point? Let kids play. That's my thing.
We have a question from Ken in the Zoom audience. I'm going to read it. I am wondering, is the speakers group, does it have any connection to the polyamorous community.
Polyamorous, yeah. So we advocate for all areas of the LGBT community. Polyamorous folks fall under the LGBTQ umbrella. We work with folks on educating, about what that is, doing some work, but we don't specifically have programs for polyamorous folks, but they do fall under the folks that we try to advocate for. Hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Oh, you're unmuted again.
Hold on. Starting out with Kamala Harris got into trouble at some point because she was asked a question about prisoners and said, of course, if they've started a treatment, then the treatment should continue, and got all sorts of flack for it. And wondered at this point in North Carolina, is transgender treatment considered an ongoing treatment that the prison system must support?
I remember that. So, which is funny that people forgot to mention is that that's the same policy had been alive since Reagan. So it wasn't something that just came up out of nowhere, right? That is a policy that the US had held because we were looking at the medical guidelines saying that once folks are in treatment, then treatment needs to be continued. North Carolina, on the other hand, has recently passed a bill saying that we do not do that. We had, and this actually passed in the we're in 25 now, passed in 23. Where folks are, one, housed in the gender that they are, or the sex they're born in, not the gender they identify. So we had we had a national case where we had a trans woman who was, she was actually put in detention with, female inmates and was there for a couple of months. And when she went to, finally got an appointment, said like, hey, I need to continue my medical treatment. They're like, oh, wait, what? You're trans? And they moved her to a men's facility. And it wasn't until she asked for medication to continue her treatment that folks were like, oh, wait, we need to switch you over. So people go through inspections before they're put in a jail. So if they didn't know up until that point, it tells you where she was at in her transition, right? But because North Carolina law now, one, she didn't get the treatment. Two, she was moved to a men's facility. Ultimately, we were able to work with her and her team. The charges were dropped. She was released. But to answer your question, North Carolina does not seek to honor trans lives or in jail. There was a bill recently that did pass, and that was part of the one that was overturned that required that no state funding is used for gender affirming care, period. So that's where we're at.
I'm actually going back to a sort of an earlier point. I thought about this when you were telling me about the story about the great big macho looking guy. I have got a friend who, I mean, she's pretty progressive, moderate progressive. Her husband's a lot more loudly progressive than she is. In fact, some of what he said on Facebook, I'm surprised he's not been arrested at this point. But regardless, a couple of years ago, she said to me, well, I just don't know about this trans treatment for like kids and teenagers because I heard about this thing where these middle school kids decide that they're the other sex, and then just because it's a cool thing to do, and then they get pressured into this surgery and they can't go back. And I said, Connie, they're not doing that kind of surgery on kids that age at all. And the reason this disturbed me extra was because of the fact that hypothetically, she should have known better. I mean, she wasn't even focusing in on the type of news that silos people into thinking that, LGBTQ people in general are all the devil out to get us, et cetera. And how do we overcome this when even the people who should be our allies are so unknowledged?
Yeah, though that's a challenge, right? We have to deal with every day. Because even folks who are very well-minded and maybe educated in a lot of spaces are not fully fluent in what LGBTQ really means, what trans identity is. And I'm not expecting everybody to be able to tell me what gender affirming care looks like from the moment that you think and start feeling, that you are trans. Like, I'm not expecting someone to do that. I can't give you that full breakdown. But what we need to start working on is really talk about fighting some of these myths, right? So um, the opposition has really built a whole narrative around, protecting women, for example, and girls by straight up putting lies out there, right? And they're so convincing, and there's a lot of money that goes into it. There's ads on TV, there's medical associations created to seek the results that they want. We have reports that are created by people who are looking to get that result. And, folks are like, okay, hold up. We're seeing this message everywhere, whether it's on Facebook or Instagram or on TV or on the radio or mailers we get, or someone sends us an article that is like being created by AI and they have all these statistics. And you start to believe it, right? One of the challenges, we don't have enough counterbalance to that. We've been working with our folks who have the ability to make these kinds of ads and really fight back, and talking, for example, with I've talked to the Democratic Party multiple times, not just about trans people, but also about immigrant people, right? If you sit there and don't put any money into combating these allegations, because it's easy to make up a lie, it's hard to prove that lie wrong, right? I can sit here, you can, that's like, we're protecting women and kids. And I have to be like, no, what you're doing is damaging these people. Like, the way to combat it, it's not by staying silent, saying people like, oh, people they're going to know about it. No, it's difficult to counterbalance that information with real fact, but it needs to happen. So we fight consistently with people about, you have the ability to do marketing. Help us do that. I don't have the millions of dollars it's going to take me to combat a full-on, agenda that is purposefully trying to mislead community members. So I don't always, I think there's definitely a lot of work to do on that piece, and we're working hard around educating, right? We do community briefings. We talk about, these conversations like today. We work with our allies to have conversations in the community and educate folks and create some material that we can head out, and they'll be like, simple, here's what this is what the reality of the situation. But when we're combating a war chest with, nickels and dimes, we really need our partners who are able to really hold that kind of space to really use their resources and combat some of this misinformation, because we'll be able to do it, and we're going to continue to work on that. But until we really have investment from national leaders and organizations with the pockets to be able to do this, we're just going to be fighting one person at a time, which we'll get there eventually. We'll get there faster if people actually put in some of these organizations invest the money we need to into it. And that's just me being jaded. Anyway.
I've got a quick question. I'm not as knowledgeable on this subject as I probably should be, because I've got a lot of things going on in my life right now. But what is the current situation with library books in schools these days? And are you aware of what can we do about it? Because I suspect I know your answer.
That was the one that was overturned. There is legislation that was put into place that would be limiting content in schools. Sorry, it wasn't overturned yet. The bill was vetoed. That's still in the works. We'll figure out whether or not we're going to be able to sustain that veto. I think we are, because it was moved from the calendar to rules, and we all know that rules is the committee that things go to die. So we're gonna hope and pray it stays there. But there is a constant attack around what can be taught and what material can be done in schools, not just in school libraries, but in community libraries. Do y'all know about Yancey County? Everybody heard of Yancey County? Yeah. It's up in Western Carolina. There is a library that was a community. It was a library that was funded in part by the commissioners. They had a like, you know, when you have anybody walked into the Drakeford Library here in Carborough? If you're not, you should totally go. It's a new library we built. As soon as you come in, there's like little round tables with like 3 or 4 little books, and it has like one thing. It's a theme, right? So it's like one of the themes in this month has been like register to vote. Another theme of like and books around elections, and then there's like Hispanic Heritage Month. There's books around Hispanic Heritage Month. They had a display like that around Pride. The county found out about it, and they sent a notice to the organizers of the library and said you have to remove that or else. The librarian was like, no. So the county was like, all right, fine. They removed their funding. They took them out of the county funding, which caused the library to close. In Yancey County. And it's so not Carborough, no, not no. Ours is fine. Ours is fine. No, this is in Yancey County. This is in Yancey County. If that was to happen, we'd probably give them more money. But in Yancey County. So it's not a law yet. You know, they're trying. This is like the 4th year that they put in a book banning bill. But in small communities where, you know, the county holds 30% of your funding and they remove it, it can be the deciding factor.
I had a question. What as far as, you know, is being done like to train students in medical school about rights of LGBTQ people?
I like that one. So we work, I mentioned that we brought in 447 people to the General Assembly, and I'm probably going to find another 2 ways of mentioning that before the day is over. One of them is working with the medical school in both UNC and Duke, right? And we're working with folks who are actively seeking to educate their students around the rights of LGBTQ folks and also the reality around the medicine for LGBTQ folks, specifically around trans issues. I've worked with Duke and UNC professors on a couple of different panels and having conversations with them. Unfortunately, this also is based on whether the school wants to teach it or not. It's a fairly new area of science. It's not been around for that long. I think it's only been like about 30, 40 years. So for, you know, medicine, it's infancy. But it is very important information that we have some medical schools seeking to teach that, and we're hoping that it grows more. And as we start seeing some of these, you know, folks really get into the medical field and push for that, we're hoping that increases. Oh, we should. Are we closing? Yeah.
Give another round of applause. You know, right. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, we'll have social time here briefly. Thank you.